Support for this podcast comes from Neutrogena Hydro Boost. Does your day last all day? Keep your skin dewy, soft, and smooth all day. New Neutrogena Hyaluronic Acid Serum quenches skin with 2 sizes of hyaluronic acid, dermatologist-recommended glycerin, and vitamin B5. Just apply in the morning for fragrance-free hydration that seals it in for 24 hours. Neutrogena Hydro Boost Hyaluronic Acid Serum. Stay dewy, soft, and drenched in hydration. Learn more at Neutrogena.com.
Empire.
We're getting down to crunch time, and we're going next level on this week's episode of the Football Jones podcast. What's up, everybody? It's Mike Jones. Thanks for coming back for another episode. You can read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at @MikeJones. And yes, we are digging deeper on a number of fronts. We're digging deeper on just the way the season is going now that we're getting down to December. It's crunch time, and teams have really started to distinguish themselves. And this was, I call Statement Sunday. We saw teams really make a statement about who they are. We saw some teams really raise some red flags about themselves. And then we saw some crazy upsets. And I don't know about you guys, but after being the butt of the jokes for a season long, the NFC East, at least Washington and the Giants, are suddenly rounding into form, and I don't know exactly what to make of these guys. But I still feel like, as far as the elite teams, they will come up short in the playoffs, but neither one of them are to be taken lightly. Not after the Giants upset the Seahawks and then Washington. I almost feel like that was even more impressive, upsetting the Steelers, who they had not beaten since 1991. It's going to be intriguing to see how this NFC East division shakes out, if it's Washington or New York that emerges there. But I do feel like we know who some of these teams are. We know who the Chiefs are. They are elite. They can win ugly. They can win pretty. They can win gunning. They can win, relying on some gutsy late game heroics and some defensive contributions. They are still the gold standard. And I'm telling you, that AFC seeding beyond them, I've got questions about a number of these teams. Pittsburgh still is the number 1 team right now, but I think that's about to come to an end. Had their first loss, and I feel like they just don't have enough balance. They're not potent enough. So they're going to come down to earth down the stretch of this season. The Titans show some wobble as the Cleveland Browns make a big statement. I mean, Baker Mayfield finally looking like a number 1 pick and giving the Browns a victory. They clinched their first winning season since like 2007. There is just a lot of really good football. When you look at the NFC, I think it's wide open. The Saints are the number 1 team, but the Packers are right there. The Rams had a big win this week. I don't know. This is going to be a really, really intriguing month of December. And so stay tuned, because we're going to learn a lot these last couple of weeks. On today's episode, though, as I said, we're going next level. And we are talking with Sean Payton, head coach of the New Orleans Saints, not only about his team, but also about advanced way of tracking and assessing player performances using Zebra Technologies. You've heard next-gen stats and things like that as they talk about the speed that these guys are running and closing and all of that stuff. I've never known how important that is in the assessment process, but we're going to talk to Sean Payton about that right now, about what he thinks of all those metrics and the technology and the way it's become a part of the game and how it helps him and his assistants do their jobs. So here we go right now. Sean Payton, head coach of the New Orleans Saints.
Support for this podcast comes from The First One with DJ Khaled, a new podcast only available on Amazon Music.
What's up, y'all? This is DJ Khaled, and this is The First One. We hear from all the A-list music stars like J Balvin, Nas, and Kelly Rowland about songs that didn't change the game, but changed their life.
It's almost like sometimes before you even get in the industry, it's like you set up to fail. And there's so many moments where you can win. And the winning is great, but it's so many things that you go through to get to the win.
And so much more, who tell their stories about their first hits that took them to the next level, changed their life, overlooked to being overbooked.
When I was recording the song, I already knew it was going to be a global hit. And I'm not joking, my G. I really felt it inside of me. I was like, I just can't wait to see it number one.
Join me every Thursday with The First One drops only on Amazon Music. Let's go.
Mike, are you there?
Yeah, Sean, how are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, pretty good. I appreciate your time. I first want to ask you, as you're coming off of a win here, a big performance for Taysom. What was it that you saw in him? You know, there were a lot of questions. Everybody knew he's a dynamic, multi-dimensional type of weapon, but what gave you confidence that he would be the guy to go with as your quarterback with Drew out?
Well, it's a good question. I think, look, the initial evaluation came off of us studying him when he was with Green Bay as a rookie. And then when we had him in the building, obviously we saw him as a quarterback. We gave him opportunities, and those kind of grew special teams, tight end, and receiver positions. But he always met with the quarterbacks, played preseason at quarterback. And, you know, it's hard because the fans don't get to see all the snaps that we see at practice, in the OTAs, in the training camps. And so he's one of those guys that can escape and really cause problems for a defense. And I think from a throwing standpoint, this past weekend was a good measuring stick for him because, look, ultimately you're going to have to make some plays in the pocket, and he did that on third down, especially in this last game against Atlanta.
Yeah, how much fun is it to game plan for a guy like that? Because I can tell it looks like you're having fun when you have those packages that he goes in, and now as he's your full-time quarterback, what is the challenge of, you know, doing what you guys do, but also finding ways to have him, you know, play his best, and how much fun is that to do that? Well,
look, honestly, the only time it's fun is when it's successful. All right, so, and that's the cool part about the job. But the preparation during the week, what we're doing today, what we're doing tomorrow, and we'll work to the wee hours, are on plays and plans and opportunities that we think fit not only Taysom, but fit our receiving core, tight end group, our running back group. You know, whatever it is that the design of the play is, and then the plan as to the opponent, you're trying to, our jobs is to try and put those guys in the best position possible for success. And so periodically when you have a play that comes off perfect and you have two receivers run deep spears and Traquan Smith is wide open, there's a little satisfaction there because you helped in that process. And then periodically there's the play where he throws it to Mike Thomas and he's covered, and Taysom makes a great throw and Mike makes a great catch. And, man, that's why you have great players. And so we're constantly, as coaches, trying to find those ways to put our players in the best position possible. And that's not just on offense, that's on defense and in the kicking game as well. And that's what keeps you up at night.
Gotcha. Now, you know, you all did it with last year with Teddy. You guys remained afloat and continued to win without Drew. You guys are doing it now with Taysom. I know that takes a lot of work for everybody, though. What are you most impressed about your team and your offense? Everybody kind of jumping in, pitching in to make sure that things remain, you know, progressing forward despite not having your future Hall of Fame quarterback.
Yeah, and a lot changes. You know, what I mean by that is there are certain things Drew gets very comfortable calling and identifying and taking charge of in the huddle. And if you ever go online and listen to one of his mic'd up games, it's pretty impressive to hear all the information, and it's happening every 20 seconds. And so what changes a little bit is, look, Taysom or Teddy or whoever's in there following Drew is not going to start right there. That's been something that has built up over 14 or 15 years with Drew as the quarterback. The number of snap counts and all of the specific little details. There's some elements to that we're going to have to pick up from individual groups, where the offensive line might have to be more vocal, and we might reduce the length of a play call, and the receivers are going to have to learn what they do then on that one play instead of us constantly tagging each route. Those are just a few of the things that I think change when you have a change like this.
Gotcha. Now, I want to get into the technology that is increasingly becoming a part of football. You all use Zebra Technologies. I've got to admit, when I first heard about this stuff, several years ago, I was a little bit skeptical. When you first heard about this way to track and measure, what did you think of it, and how have you started using it in your evaluations and preparations?
Well, for me, my first exposure and sell and all right, am I interested, was soft tissue injury prevention, training camp. How do we actually measure the workload of an individual player? 10 years ago, it might say, hey, I want to monitor Mike Thomas today at practice. And the receiver coach would say, all right, I'll back off of him, coach. And then it's kind of, it was very ambiguous. I mean, what does that mean? And so I can recall in training camp looking at the data after a training camp practice, and pretty soon when you look at 15 offensive linemen in training camp, you kind of get an idea of miles traveled at practice. They were varying between 2 and 3.5 miles depending on each player. That made sense. And then this is one practice. And then the receiver group was measuring somewhere here at 5 to 6, depending on the receiver. Maybe he was on special teams, but you began to get these averages that you saw literally, and then they were made up of tracked exactness of a player on the field. So when he enters that marked area, like your invisible fence, like every NFL field has, you're able to track all of that information, and that's just one part of it. But then seeing an outlier, like back then it was Brandon Cooks, one of our receivers, he was at 8.5. I'm like, whoa, is a player overtraining? Do we have to watch him for soft tissue? That was my beginning exposure. And now years later, my son, the fans of the game are looking at next-gen stats. They're telling you the fastest kick return this weekend, or the fastest miles per hour a player reached this weekend is such and such. And it was 22 miles an hour, and it was on this pass play. And so there's a network entertainment value. There is I think, health and safety value relative to the information. And then there's also a workload value, because now we can see the personnel groups that were on the field. You'll be able to see, without having to break down every play on film, they were in 11 personnel 34% of the time in the first half. And so it's just tangible information that you can do with or without what you want. But at some point, all 32 teams rely on an element of it. Now, we may use it differently. There's elements that we all use very similarly. I think the networks use the entertainment value to some degree, and it provides more information. But I think we're going to see it expand relative to the officiating, relative to a lot of areas. There's just an exactness with it.
Now, you already pour over tons of information. How do you handle adding one more thing to your plate, as far as, do you have somebody on your staff that's responsible for that and then presenting you with the data?
Look, we do self-scouts. Mm-hmm. We do, which is real important. What do we look like to the other team? And then what's the other team look like to us? For me, it's more important relative to our players' health But it can save it can save just time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, here we are playing Philadelphia. We're in week 12, whatever week we're in. We break down all the games. We have all of this year. We have all last year if we want. But real quickly, if I ask, hey, how much are they in nickel personnel on defense, third down versus dime, I can get that information. It might be it's on Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
All right. But if I go, all right, how much? So there's a little bit of just the reduction of, tedious work.
Mm-hmm.
And so now, is that factoring into what or how I call plays? No. It's just giving me the information quicker.
Right. Gotcha. What do you think the future is as far as the way that you all as teams will use this? And like you said, it saves time now. Where do you see it going?
I think, look, I see this being more and more viable for us as we try to help the officials.
Okay.
The spotting of the football with the chip in it. Does it cross the line with the chip in it? When was it fumbled with the chip in it? Did it go through the uprights the correct way? You know, there are a lot of times when the punter punts the ball and it goes in the air out of bounds that we come up with a randomness of a spot.
Mm-hmm.
And, the 10-yard chain between two sticks, I see this data helping us officiate the game a little bit easier.
Did you ever imagine that you'd be talking about technology and chips and footballs and shoulder pads and everything like that when you talk about a game that's so physical and human element?
Right. Well, look, you don't pay attention. You go get your groceries, and then the gal swipes it for you, and now they have the section that you could swipe it yourself, and I really don't like doing that.
Right.
Because I always feel like people are going to look at me, did he pay? And I'm like, yeah, I just feel like I don't like the self-checkout.
Right.
But that zebra and that little barcode essentially is their bread and butter, and it's what they do better than anyone else. And they do it not just with food, they do it with product, they do it with airplane parts, car parts, and they do it with football players.
Gotcha. Well, we're in closing here. What is your assessment of this NFC? It looks like, obviously you guys lead the way. It seems like it's kind of wide open with a lot of really good competition. What's your assessment as you guys enter this last month of the season heading toward the playoffs?
Well, look, there are a lot of good teams. Man, I think the one thing that as a coach you're constantly thinking of is, man, how do we stay COVID-free? Because that's the wild card this year that can really possibly hamper a team at the wrong time, hamper a team in their ability to get in the playoffs or have success in the playoffs because of how it can impact very quickly a locker room. But no, I think, look, you look around, the Rams are playing exceptionally well. Green Bay just keeps winning football games. San Francisco had a tough loss last night, and Seattle, I'm sure, will bounce back. Man, I didn't even, Tampa Bay, it seems like, hadn't played in 2 weeks because there were a few teams that had later buys.
Mm-hmm.
They were one of them. And then, you're really just as much grief as the NFC East has gotten. This past weekend, Washington beat Pittsburgh, and the New York Giants went on the road and beat Seattle. And so when it comes to the postseason, the tournament, everyone has that same opportunity.
Right. Now, when you talk about that COVID challenge, do you see more teams going to almost to like individual bubbles, or what's the way to try to keep your guys as healthy as possible?
I think teams will just be that much more responsible to each other, and they might have individual strategies, but with that much at stake, I think you'll find that even the finest details will be even looked at closer.
Gotcha. All right, Coach. Well, I really appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Yep, absolutely.
Hey everybody, it's Elaine Welteroth, and I'm hosting a new podcast called Built to Last by American Express, where we will dive deep into the stories, history, and continued legacy of small businesses that shape American culture. Our debut season will focus on Black-owned small businesses that need our support now more than ever. In each episode, we feature the story of a Black business trailblazer that has inspired a modern Black-owned business. First up is Pinky Cole of Atlanta's food truck turned restaurant, Slutty Vegan. We'll also chat with Hanifa Mwemba, the cutting-edge designer behind the Hanifa 3D digital fashion show. Plus, we'll check in with Issa Rae, our modern-day Renaissance woman. We hope that it encourages all of our listeners to support these businesses as well as the Black-owned businesses in your own communities. Tune in for these amazing stories and others on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
There you have it. I am definitely going to be even more intrigued when I hear these next gen stats and how they're, and try to connect the dots on what they mean and, how it helps the NFL going forward, teams, their performances. And I'm definitely very intrigued by this New Orleans Saints team. Even without Drew Brees, they look like one of the best teams in the league. Can this be a year that they make a run? Like I said, the NFC is wide open, and we're going to be following along to see where they go. Well, I hope you guys have a great day. Thanks again for listening. Take this podcast, please share with a friend. Do me that favor. That's my Christmas gift. Share this podcast with a friend, and then read me at usatoday.com. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram @ByMikeJones, and I'll talk to you guys again next time.